Okay guys, so today's lesson is going to be called Convert Customary Units of Length. And now, I can't remember, I think we've used that word convert before, but if not, all it means is to change something from one to another. And you may think, oh my gosh, converting length, I've never done that before, what do we do? However, let's do a little practice in converting to see that, it is something that you've done before. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one dime and we're going to convert it into pennies. We know that one dime is worth 10 cents. A penny is worth 1 cent. So that means there are 10 pennies in one dime. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we converted one dime or changed one dime into 10 pennies. We have the same amount of money. If you have one dime and your friend has 10 pennies, you have the same amount of money. The same as if I had a dollar and I wanted to convert it into pennies. Well, I'm not going to draw all the pennies we need, but we know $1 has 100 cents. Since each penny is worth 1 cent, we would need 100 pennies to make $1. It's the same thing. If you have if you have 100 pennies, you have the same thing as a dollar. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, is how to convert measurements. We're going to see if we have this many feet, how many inches is that? If we have this many yards, how many feet is that? And so on. So what I want you to do now is get out. It's the first page in your packet for today, and it looks like this. So on this anchor chart, we have our units of length, our feet, our inches, our yards, and our miles. Remember, we learned about that yesterday. Can't find it now. Oh well. We learned about it yesterday. You had that anchor chart from yesterday that listed all of the units, the customary units of length from shortest to longest. Oh, I forgot. I put it right here on the board. You can look at that too. We know that the shortest is an inch, and then we go to a foot, and then we go to a yard, and then we go to the longest, which is a mile. So this chart tells us how many of these units are inside one of another unit. So this chart tells us that 1 foot is the same as 12 inches. We know that because a ruler is 1 foot long, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 inches. The chart also tells us that 1 yard is the same as 3 feet. Well, again, we know that because we know a yardstick is 3 feet long, and we have, 1, 2, 3 feet. This chart also tells us that this says mile. You can see it on your chart, but my chart, it's a little hard to read. 1 mile is the same as 5,280 feet. So if you repeated this yardstick, if you had 5,280 of these yardsticks and put them end to end, you would end up a mile away from where you started. 1 mile is also the same as 1,760 yards. So if you had 1,760 yardsticks and line them up end to end, you would end up a mile away from where you started. This is very important. This is something that does need to be memorized. You need to know off the top of your head that there are 12 inches in 1 foot, there are 3 feet in 1 yard, there are 5,280 feet in 1 mile, and 1,760 yards in 1 mile. This is a chapter where you are going to have to do a lot of memorizing because you're going to have to memorize these conversion charts. Some of them won't be so hard because we know 1 foot has 12 inches because of a ruler, and we know that 1 yard is 3 feet because of a yardstick. The rest of it, you're going to have to study these charts. So, do not give me back these charts. Tear them out every time you get to an anchor chart in your packet. Tear it out and keep it because you will need to memorize it and you will need to remember it. If you give it to me, it will not be helpful at all when you're studying for your test. So right now, before you go on, tear this anchor chart out of your packet. Do not give it back to me. This is for you, not for me. I do not want it back. It being with me does not help you at all on your test. So tear it out right now. Put it somewhere where you will remember it so that you can study from it later. Okay, now what I want you to do is turn to the back, which looks like this. Okay, so now you should be looking at the back, which looks like this. This is a rule that you will also need to memorize because this rule is how you will figure out what to do, which we'll talk about in this lesson. This rule, or these two rules, will help you to figure out how to solve the problems. So what I want you to do is take your pencil and big units to small units, you multiply. So if you have a larger unit and you are trying to change it or convert it to a smaller unit, you will multiply. So if you have a larger unit, like feet, and you're trying to convert it to inches, which are smaller, you're going to multiply. That's where this chart from yesterday will help you because it tells you which ones are larger. It tells you that the inch is the shortest, the foot is the next shortest, then we go to the yard, and then we have the miles. So if you're at miles and you're trying to figure out how many feet are in that mile, you're going from big to small, so you will multiply. If you are going from miles to yards, feet, or inches, you will multiply. If you are going from yards to feet or inches, you will multiply. If you are going from feet to inches, you will multiply. The other rule says from small to big, you divide. So if you are starting with a small unit and trying to convert to a big unit, you divide. So that means if you are starting with a smaller unit, like inches, and trying to go to yards, you're going to divide. So that means if you're going from inches to feet, yards, or miles, you will divide. If you are going from feet to yards or miles, you will divide. If you are starting with yards and trying to get miles, you will divide. So you will never divide the number of miles by anything because it's the largest, and you will never multiply the number of inches to get a conversion. Okay, so now that we've talked about that, let's move on to the what is in the textbook. So go ahead, open your book to page 703. Okay, so let's look at the sentence under the title and read it with me while I read out loud. You can multiply to convert or change between units. We already know that. We know that convert means to change, so go ahead and underline that. Convert or change tells us that convert and change mean the same thing. They are synonyms for each other. We know that. We know that we can multiply if we are starting with oh my gosh, why can't I remember this? I've done this like 3 times. If we're starting with a large unit and changing it or converting it to a small unit, we would multiply. Now we have another handy chart. I just thought, the other one's more fun, but this is another chart you can use. We know 1 foot is the same as 12 inches, 1 yard is the same as 3 feet, and 1 mile is the same as 5,280 feet. This one does not have yards, but you do have that on your other chart. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at example 1. Okay, so everyone should have their finger or pencil on example 1 and read it in your head while I read it out loud. Marla's dog, Corey, loves to jump into water. Corey's longest jump is 7 yards. We know 7 yards is going to be important. How many feet are in 7 yards? So, we know the number of yards, 7, and we're trying to find the number of feet. Yards are a larger unit than feet. So if we're starting with yards and going to feet, that means we're going big to small, which means we will multiply. Yards are a larger unit. We know that because of our chart from the other day. Yards are further to the right than feet, so that means they are larger. And we know when we go big to small, we multiply. From big to small, you multiply. So, we also know that there are 3 feet in 1 yard. Our chart from this morning tells us that there are 3 feet in 1 yard. So that means what we have to do is we have to take the number of yards, which is 7, and multiply it by 3 to get the number of feet. 7 times 3 is 21. So that means there are 21 feet in 3 yards. Now what that looks like is you have a yardstick. You know that there are 3 feet in this yardstick. 1, 2, and 3. So if you take this and repeat this 7 times for 7 yards, that means you also have to repeat that 3 feet 7 times. So 7 yards times 3 equals 21. So there are 21 feet in 3 yards. We can check by drawing a picture. We know that a yard has 3 feet in it. So here's our yards. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We know that there are 3 feet in each yard, so we could break this now into each of these pieces into 3, or we could draw another picture where we just make sure that we line up each group of 3, like that. And then we count how many of these pieces are in it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Now you do not have to check that way. However, some people like to, it helps them to learn. They are visual learners, or they like to draw it out. Go right ahead. Just make sure you keep it with your independent practice so that you can use it when you study. But on your test, you will not be able to draw it. Well, I mean, you can draw it, but you also have to show the multiplication. So we know we take the number of our bigger unit, which is 7, and we multiply it by the number of the smaller unit in one of that larger unit. That sounds confusing, but it's really not. We know there are 7 yards. There's 3 feet in each of those yards, so we are repeating 3 feet 7 times to get 21 total feet. Okay, now go ahead and turn the page, and let's look at example 2. Okay, so everybody should have their finger or pencil on example 2, and read it in your head while I read out loud. Convert 3 1/2 feet to inches. So we're starting with 3 1/2 feet, and we're changing it to inches. Well, feet, if we look at our chart from yesterday, we see that feet are larger than inches. So that means we are going from big to small, which means we multiply. Now, first, this is a mixed number. 3 1/2 is a mixed number. So first we're going to convert the whole number the same way we did in example 1. We know that there are 3 feet, There are 12 inches in each of those feet. So we are going, our chart tells us that there are 12 inches in each of those feet. So we are going to repeat 12 inches 3 times for each of those feet. 3 times 12 is a basic fact. We know the answer is 36. So far we know that there are at least 36 inches in 3.5 feet. But we haven't used that half yet. So what we have to do is now we have to convert the fraction. We know that 1 foot is the same as 12 inches. And so that means we need to take half of that foot. The way we would do that is we would take the number of inches in 1 foot and divide it in half, which means we divide it by 2. So that equals 6 inches. Whenever you are given a fraction, what you do is you divide the number of your unit that you're converting to by the denominator of that fraction. I know there are 12 inches in 1 foot, so I'm going to take the number of inches in 1 foot, divide it by the denominator, which is 2, to get 6 inches. So half of a foot is the same as 6 inches. So now I know that there are 36 inches in 3 feet and 6 inches in half of a foot. So now I just have to add them together to get the total number of inches. 36 inches plus 6 inches equals 42 inches. So there are 42 inches in 3.5 feet. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do an example 3 because I think you need one more example of how to do this when you have a mixed number in your first one. So you have some room, if you write kind of small but not so small that you can't read it because then it won't help you, underneath the flower on the towel, it looks like, or yoga mat or something. So example 3, I'm going to do it right here. You can draw it under that example 3. So let's say I have 3 1/3 yards, and I want to figure out how many feet there are. So I have 3 1/3 yards, and I'm trying to convert it to feet. I'm trying to figure out how many feet. Well, I know yards are bigger than feet, so that means I'm going big to small, which means I multiply. Make sure that you are writing all of this in your book. First, we convert the whole number. We have 3 yards. We know that there are 3 feet in each of those yards. So we're going to multiply 3 yards times 3 feet, because we're taking that 3 feet and we're repeating it 3 times, to get 9 feet. So there are at least 9 feet in 3 yards. But we have to figure out this 1/3. So remember, what we do is we take the number of units of the smaller unit that are in the larger unit, which is 3. There are 3 feet in 1 yard. And then we're going to divide it by the denominator, which is 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. That means 1/3 of a yard is the same as 1 foot. Now, we are just going to add the number of feet in the whole number and the number of feet in the fraction together to get 10 feet. So that means 3 1/3 yards, is equal to 10 feet. If you have any questions about that, make sure that you reach out to me later today and I will help you. Okay, make sure that you have finished writing this. Pause if you need to. But remember, if you have a fraction, you first find the number of the unit in the in the whole number. Then you divide the number of smaller units that are in one of the larger units by the denominator, and then add those 2 answers together. If you have any questions about that, please reach out to me. Normally there are usually questions about this, so I will not be surprised at all or upset or anything if you have questions. Please, please, please reach out to me if you need some more examples and some more help with this. Okay, so now we know we've finished all the examples, we've added an example, let's move on to the guided practice. Okay, so for the guided practice, we have these things called conversion charts. These are called conversion charts. So, what we are going to do, you have to show your work. And I'm going to show you in this guided practice exactly how to show your work. So however we have it in the guided practice, make sure that's how you do it in the independent practice and your homework. Otherwise, you will be counted off. Because I need to see that you know exactly which numbers to use. You also need that to study for your test. Because if you look back and all you have are the feet here and then the number of inches, you may not have any memory of how to get from the feet to the inches. So make sure that you show your work. So number one, we have a chart with inches and feet. We know the number of feet, and we're trying to get the number of inches. Feet are larger than inches, so that means over here, give yourself space, but we are going to do a multiplication symbol because we're going to be multiplying. We're going to be using the number of feet to get to a smaller unit, so we are going to multiply. So over here, on this side, next to each row, put a multiplication sign because we already know we're going to be multiplying. Now we're going to take the number of feet, which we know, and that will be our first factor. So we are going to multiply each of these feet by something to get the number of inches. We know that there are 12 inches in each foot, so that means we are going to be multiplying by 12 each time. Because we're repeating 12 inches by the number of feet. So now we just have to fill in the blanks. 1 foot times 12 inches equals 12 inches. 2 times 12 is 24 inches in 2 feet. 3 times 12 is 36 inches in 3 feet. And 4 times 12 is 48 inches in 4 feet. Now, we have to list the number pairs. We have 12, and remember we list them in order. So the inches come first. That means the inches come first in our number pairs. There are 12 feet in there are 12 inches in 1 foot. There are 24 inches in 2 feet. There are 36 inches in 3 feet. And there are 48 inches, in 4 feet. Okay. So if you have any questions about that, please reach out to me. Now we have another conversion chart. We have yards and inches. This time we know the inches, which are smaller. They are smaller. So what we have to do is we are going to have to divide. Because we know small to big, you divide. Otherwise, you'd end up with if you multiplied, you'd end up with a larger number than 36. But yards are yards are larger, so there are less yards. The number for yards is less than the number for inches, so that means we're going to divide. But there's another catch. Inches and feet are right next to each other. Feet and yards, like in example 1, are right next to each other on our chart. However, inches and yards have something in between them. So that means we have to start with inches, then go to feet, then go to yards. This is a multi-step problem. This is where you will need a separate sheet of paper. So right now, pause this video, get out a separate sheet of paper, because it's really too much work to show right here. Make sure you get it from your clean paper binder, not your notebooks, because I gave you extra paper in your clean paper binder, so it should be right there. Do not use your notebooks because you're going to run out of space, and if you're turning it into me, I do not want all that little frilly stuff, and neither does any other teacher ever. You will have some teachers that will just not even accept it if it has that frilly stuff. Do not tear it out of your notebook. Get it out of your clean paper binder. Okay, so I'm going to show my work here. You're going to be on a separate sheet of paper. Make sure you are neat. Make sure you can keep it with your math book. So, for number 2, what we have to do is we know inches, then we have to go to feet, and then we can go to yards. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take 4 lines of my notebook paper to show each problem. We know we have 36 inches, so on the next line I know we have 108 inches. On the next line I know we have 216 inches, and then on that 4th line I know we have 252 inches. We already know we're dividing, so let's go ahead and put our division symbol. Now we are going to divide by the number of inches in each foot. I'm sorry, in the number, yes, the number of inches in a foot. So we're going to divide each by 12 to figure out how many feet are in this number of inches. So 36 divided by 12, that's a basic fact. So we know we now have 3 feet. 108, that's another basic fact. So now we know we have 9 feet in 108 inches. This is where it gets a little different, where we're going to have to do a little bit of multiplication. I'm sorry, division, where we're going to have to work it out. But you do know how to do this. You're going to take 12, and you are going to divide 216 by 12. Let me write that a little bigger so you can see. I am going to put it right here. No, actually, you know what? I'll come over here. You do it on your separate sheet of paper, though. I just want a place where I have room to write it very large. So I'm dividing 216 by 12. I do this the same exact way that I do division with 1 digit. But this, because we are only going to be working with where we need to know basic facts, we can do this. We know that 12 can't go into 2, but it can go into 21. So we'll move 1 over, and we know 12 goes into 21 1 time. 1 times 12 is 12. 21 minus 12, well, we can just count backwards. 21, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12 is 9. 9, oh, I'm sorry, oops, bring down the 6, sorry. That is a basic fact. 12 goes into 96. 8 times 12 is 96. 96 minus 96 is 0. So that means 216 divided by 12 is 18 feet. Now we do the same thing with 252 divided by 12. So I'm just going to erase this and use the same one, but you do it somewhere different. Do not do it in the same place. And we have 252. Well, we know 12 can't go into 2, but 12 can go into into 25. We know because of basic facts that 12 goes into 25 2 times. 2 times 12 is 24. 25 minus 24 is 1. Bring down the 2. 12 goes into 12 goes into 12 1 time. 1 times 12 is 12. 12 minus 12 is 0. So that means 252 divided by 18 is 21 feet. We're still not done, because now we know how many feet are in each of those inches, but now we need to know how many yards. So again, feet are smaller than yards, so we're going to divide. We know there are 3 feet in each yard, so that means we are dividing by 3. Now we have all basic facts. 3 divided by 3 is 1, which means there is 1 yard in 36 inches. 9 divided by 3 is 3, which means there are 3 yards in 108 inches. 18 divided by 3 is, 18 divided by 3 is 6. Sorry, I had a little brain fart. So there are 6 yards in 216 feet. And then 21 divided by 3 is 7, which means that there are 7 yards in 252 feet. So, now that's what you have to do with some of these charts. If the units are not right next to each other on this chart that we had yesterday, so make sure you have that out, you do have to go between, like this. Yards and inches have feet in between them, so we have to go from inches to feet, then to yards. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a problem like 252 divided by 36, which you do not know how to solve yet, because we do know that there are 36 inches in 1 yard, But if you know those inches and those yards, that means you have to divide each by 36. Well, 36 divided by 36 is easy, it's 1. But 108 divided by 36, you don't know how to do that yet. And you may be able to figure it out, but again, remember, going too fast means that some of this stuff is going to get lost, and you're not going to remember it, and it's not going to mean as much. So what we have to do now is when our units are not right next to each other on the chart, we have to go between them. Remember, big to small, you multiply, like in number 1. Small to big, you divide, like in number 2. Okay, so we're not going to do any of the guided practice together, the independent practice together, because it's pretty much exactly like what we've been doing. Let's look at it so I can tell you where to look. Numbers 3 through 6, you're going to look at how you did these. If you don't have this written down somewhere because you're like, oh, I'll remember it, you're going to be in trouble when you get to here because you're not going to remember it. You're really going to get in trouble when you get to your homework, and then you're going to be in the most trouble when you get to your tests and your check my progresses, because it's going to be really hard to remember which video to go back and watch, and especially in the middle of a test, you can't do that, otherwise it's cheating. So you need to make sure that you have all of your work shown. You will not be able to remember every single step every single time. So for numbers 3 through 6, you need to do it on a separate sheet of paper like you did number 2. Just keep going, 3, 4, 5. Give yourself a lot of space to do these division problems. Sometimes you may have to set up some multiplication problems up and down, all of that. Make sure that if the units are not right next to each other on this chart, that you go between. So if you have inches and yards, you go to feet first. If you have miles and yards, well, you can use, if you have miles and yards, if you have miles and feet, you do not have to go to yards first because you have that on your conversion chart. You have how many miles. So it's mostly just if you have yards and inches, then you need to go between them. If you have, or if you have inches and miles, I'm not sure if you do, but if you have inches and miles, well then you need to go to either feet or yards first. I would suggest feet. Feet would be a little easier. There will be times where you will have to do multiplication up and down, because you might have to multiply something by something very large. So make sure that you do that work. Show that work. If you cannot remember how to multiply or divide, that's fine, it's been a while. Go ahead and look at the IXLs and work on those. You might have double-digit multiplication, you might have single-digit multiplication. The only double-digit division you should have are basic facts, 10, 11, and 12. And they won't give you a number that's so large that you can't do it just using your basic facts. Okay, numbers 7 through 9 are like examples 1 and 2. So numbers 3 and 6 are like the guided practice number 1 and 2. 7 through 9 are like example 1 and 2. 10 through 13, you will find the answers by looking at your conversion chart. You will find the answers for numbers 10 through 13 by looking at your conversion chart. Numbers 14 through 16 are, are word problems. Make sure you have equations. If you need them, make sure you show your work on a separate sheet of paper. Make sure you have units. Every time you're doing measurement, you need to have the unit, like inches, feet, yards, miles, whatever. You need to have that. Make sure you're paying attention to whether the answer is calling for a word or a number with a unit. And then numbers 17 through 19 are critical thinking, so that means you either are doing reasoning, which is a form of critical thinking where you're thinking, that doesn't sound right because I know you have to do this. This is where you're taking what you've learned today and what you already know and putting it together to come up with a new answer. Now go ahead and look at the homework. Everybody listen to this. If you've turned the video off already, well then you're going to be in trouble when it comes to your grade. Numbers 1 through 12. You have to show your work on a separate sheet of paper. So do not do it on the same sheet of paper from your independent practice. Do it on a new clean sheet, just like you normally would. If you have a stapler at home, staple it. If you have paper clips at home, paper clip them together. If not, just dog-ear them together and that will help them stay. So you'll take the two sheets and then you'll dog-ear them both so that they kind of stay together. So numbers 1 through 12, you need a separate sheet of paper to show your work. Even if it's just doing side to side like that, because it's a basic fact. I still need to see it. Numbers 13 through 17, you will also have to show your work because you have to match. Well, you have to figure out how many of whatever are in each of these. Numbers 18 through 20, all you have to do, you need an equation with the answer and the unit on the line, and you need to show your work on a separate sheet of paper. So that means numbers 1 through 20, you do need a separate sheet of paper to show your work. It's the same amount of work, you're just doing it on a separate sheet instead of this one, because you have to show your work to solve these. Just please don't show your work on your math sheet. That is so hard for me to grade because I can't tell what is what goes with what. The answer usually gets covered up by something else. It is just a mess and it's hard to read. So you do have to show your work for numbers 1 through 20 on a separate sheet of paper. Write yourself a note on your homework right now so that you remember. Numbers 21 and 22 are vocabulary, so obviously you don't have to fill in the blank. I mean, you don't have to show your work. You just have to fill in the blank with the correct word. And number 23, you have to show your work. So numbers 1 through 20 and then number 23, show your work on a separate sheet of paper. Make sure you have the answer with the unit for those word problems. Okay, if you have any questions on today's lesson, please reach out to me this afternoon through Skype. Okay, go ahead and do the independent practice now, and then you can do the homework or you can wait until later today.